Always welcome at 1-775-285-5800. That's 1-775-285-5800.
Well, Nancy McMoneagle is a president and executive director of the Monroe Institute, TMI, which is a research and educational organization that has been facilitating individuals' experience in the exploration of targeted and expanded states of consciousness for more than 40 years. Nancy helped build the foundations of TMI with Robert Monroe in the early 1970s and is now continuing the Institute's mission of advancing the exploration of human consciousness and the experience of expanded states of awareness as a path to creating a life of personal freedom, meaning, insight, and happiness. And what a treat it is to welcome Nancy McMoneagle to the program tonight. Thank you so much for joining me, Nancy, and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, Heather, for having me on tonight.
This is a real treat. I guess we should start out with, for people that don't know about the Monroe Institute, what do you do there?
Well, for the last 40-plus years, and I should add that Bob Monroe, who's known for his work in out-of-body experiences and his books on the same topic, started this institute over 40 years ago. And since then, and we continue to look into states of consciousness, try to understand what is happening in these expanded states of consciousness. How can we best use them? How can we understand them? And how can we explore all these various states, everything from just deep relaxation to being into states of consciousness that take us beyond the realms of reality as we know them here, meaning beyond physical matter reality. So we continue to do that work and then find ways, of course, to make people's lives better as a result of their being able to experience them. So what we do here is offer programs and what we have learned, taking people into these states of consciousness using an audio technology that Bob, I guess he must have developed this back in the 70s.
Yeah.
It's called hemi-sync. Mm-hmm. And we also have another audio technology we're now using called spatial angle modulation. Using these technologies, we help people get into states of consciousness much more quickly. And, of course, we do not use drugs, and so the person always remains in control.
So then it must be pretty interesting when you're out and about and people ask you, what do you do?
Yeah, try to do it. Can you say that in 10 words or less? Really.
Right.
It is fascinating when you're talking about, well, let's see, have you ever heard of the out-of-body experience?
Right. Yes, right. When people ask me that, I just look at them with a long 1,000-yard stare and I say, aliens. That's what I do.
Aliens, which we all are, of course.
Yeah, so. Right. And then they don't ask any more questions. All right. Well, that gives us a good framework for everything else that we're going to talk about tonight. And, last night, I guess we were talking about something else, but it kind of kept coming up, as it often does, the subject of consciousness. And a listener sent me a very simple question, and I think your answer, you could probably answer this better than I did. She asked, gosh, consciousness, it's all I hear on the program all the time. What do you mean? What are you talking about? Help me out.
It depends on who you're talking to. Well, of course, there must be 11 different definitions of that word. And for my purposes, what I look at, and I think actually everybody here might give you a little bit of a different explanation, but overall, what we look at as consciousness is a greater awareness. It's an energy. Bob Monroe believed that focused consciousness, focused awareness, would have all the answers to any of humanity's questions. And so when we talk about consciousness, what we're talking about, and it's beyond mental. We're not just talking a mental exercise here. I think it's a fundamental. It's a fundamental force, if you will. In my particular belief system, I think consciousness is in everything. There's a certain level of awareness in everything. There's a certain level of energy, if you will. And so consciousness, and it's not something that's easy. It's like, okay, would you please describe love? To me, it's that difficult to wrap your your words around.
It is.
But what we're doing here is what we're trying to do is focus who we are, what we are, all that we are, into, let's say, for example, you want to understand how to best approach a certain problem. How do you want to learn how to use who and what you are to heal? Healing energy, for example. There's a certain approach we take for learning to control how we use our minds, and by minds, I'm not talking brains. So we're going beyond the materialistic here, and now we're into the great debate of materialism versus spirituality. I know it's a huge thing right now, but how can you combine those two? So consciousness, as far as I'm concerned, is about being as aware and connected to everything, everyone, all that is. And then how do you apply that in your life? Because if you can't apply it, I mean, we're here as physical human beings, spiritual human beings. You've got to be able to apply this to make your life better, to understand things better, and let's not forget to have fun.
Oh, good Lord, yes.
It's really critically important to have fun. So though this is a huge, huge subject, and it's all-inclusive and so very important, it's important to have fun with it, too. So,
oh, yeah.
Anyway,
is.
I know that's all over the place, but so be it. That's
well,
I don't have a 5-word explanation or definition for it.
It's a very difficult question to answer. When I saw the question, because I have inherited the wormhole over here, so when I'm
Bless your heart.
live and on the air, everybody's sending me their thoughts and their questions, and I love that aspect of doing the program. And when I saw this question come through, what do you mean when you're talking about consciousness all the time? It almost felt like I was punched in the chest, not because, it's a very good question, and I'm going...
Well, because it's all that is, how do you talk about something that is so all-encompassing, which consciousness is?
And how do you define something that most scientists, all scientists, don't even understand what it is?
They're trying, God bless them.
They are.
They really are trying, and we've got some great people out there working away at it, you know? And the beauty of it is there's a lot going on now where they're trying to blend the science with spirituality instead of making it an either-or proposition.
I think that's the right way to go, because I think that's what we are. I think we are a combination of a material body and a spiritual body. And in my mind, that's what life is. And I think that applies to animals and plants. Go ahead, and people can call me crazy for saying that, but that's what my, I guess, limited information has told me. I don't know what to say.
I don't know. I think that's what we explore here. Exactly what is this thing called consciousness? When Bob started having his out-of-body experiences, and for those who don't know who Bob Monroe was, and I should add here, for full disclosure and transparency, he was my stepfather. And before that, a very good mentor friend. He was my first boss at age 14. This man was a very important part of my life, and that's how it happened that I helped start the foundations of this institute, because I was one of the guinea pigs. And what he was interested in was sleep learning. He was interested in the out-of-body experience because it just happened to him. He would find his consciousness beyond the scope of just this physical matter body. He thought he was going crazy, and so he went to psychiatrists, psychologists, medical doctors. What's happening to me? Do I have a neurological problem? And so forth. And they said, no, you're fine, but hey, you may want to study these books, on astral projection. And you'll notice a lot, for anyone who has read Bob's books, and the classic is Journeys Out of the Body, they'll notice that he chooses not to use certain words because they're so heavily laden with overtones of perhaps religion or other belief systems, and he didn't want to do that. So as opposed to calling it astral projection, he called it the out-of-body experience. Much like now, people, instead of talking about psychic activity, they'll call it anomalous cognition. I think you talked with Ed May, our dear friend, not too long ago, and he probably mentioned that. I think, in fact, that might be his term.
Oh, it just
anomalous
might
cognition.
be. Yeah, I think I do remember him saying that.
So in any event, so going back to this, when you're looking into all these various states, who am I beyond just this physical body? Who am I beyond the person who goes to work, earns the money, comes home, raises the kids, drives the car, and so forth? And that's what we offer here, is this opportunity to get into deeper, more profound states of consciousness. You could say awareness about who you are, about what things are, about what else is quote-unquote out there, but it's probably in there, if you're following me. Mm-hmm. And then how can you use that to better your life? How can you use that to communicate better with people, to have better relationships, to be more creative, to learn how to use some pretty, what we would call incredible skills, but once you start learning all that's available to you, they're not anymore, such as healing ability. And so we have all these various programs here at the Institute which offer gateways into these various areas, starting with our very first program, the Gateway Voyage program. And this is what Bob started so many, many years ago, just trying to understand what was happening to himself with this out-of-body experience.
The Gateway Voyage program.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What is that about? What does that entail?
Well, it's a 5-day, 6-night program, and it's what we call our flagship program, if you will. And this is the start. We teach people techniques, again, using the audio technology of the hemi-sync, which is short for hemispheric synchronization. Mm-hmm. And it helps people explore different states of consciousness where they're experiencing it themselves. All we do is we provide the tools. And then people learn to get into these different states, starting with, and he called them focus levels. So he would say, for example, when your body's asleep and your mind is awake, he called that focus 10. Focus 12 is where you start to have more expanded awareness. Focus 15 is where you go into a state of no time, and so forth. And it goes more and more and greater states of awareness, so that what you are learning to do is access parts of yourself, talents that you never knew you had before. People end up going into these states and then also getting into communication with parts of themselves, as well as perhaps people who have passed on. Because remember, we're talking about getting beyond physical matter reality. Mm-hmm. So then it starts getting very interesting and perhaps a tad bit esoteric, but I suspect your listeners have a tad bit of esoteric interest, otherwise they wouldn't be tuned in. So.
Oh, absolutely right. Yes, and I have heard, I have a guest, Marcus Leader, who comes on now and then, and he's tried to tell me about these different levels, and he says that the levels go all the way up to the same level that a person goes into during a near-death experience. Is that true?
Oh, yes, right. As a matter of fact, when my mother died, who was Nancy Penn Monroe, my stepfather, Bob, wanted to put together a program that helped perhaps people obtain access to be able to communicate with those who had passed on. And so in looking at, now remember, a lot of this is done using audio technology. So he's mixing and putting together various sophisticated combinations of sounds to help elicit different brain wave states. Okay, and that's where the hemispheric synchronization comes from, talking about synchronizing the left and right hemispheres. And of course, everyone perhaps by this time is aware of that model, where it's a simplistic one, granted, but the left brain being more analytical and the right brain being more that would be sensitive and more musically inclined and so forth. You get those two working together, and wow, you've really got access to something. So he thought, all right, let's take a whole-brained approach, and so that's why he was using binaural beats and other combinations of sounds to come up with hemi-sync. As he got more sophisticated in the use of these and the research, which involved, again, using a group he called the Explorers, and I was one of the guinea pig explorers in the early days, how does this sound make you feel? Well, we went into these other states, and so getting higher and higher, where, for example, he would take you into the state between lifetimes. He would then go from there into the state, called it Focus 21, where you're bridging that area between physical and non-physical realms. And then you keep going on more and more until then you get to the one that you just asked about, which we call Focus 27. And that's where it's kind of like an after area of life, if you will, where maybe people go after they have left their physical bodies, and where you consciously can take your, here we go again, your consciousness, your awareness, and interact with these people. And perhaps if there are any who need help in moving on. And so we actually have a program called Lifeline, where people get into these states and then help others realize that they're not stuck, that they can then move on beyond that. And then there are other levels beyond that even, where you're talking about communicating with intelligences that are perhaps maybe haven't been human, so to speak.
Oh, now we're talking.
All right. So if you've ever read Bob's books, you know, he has this whole kind of cosmology put together because of his experiences, where he talks about these various locales and stuff. Mm-hmm. But, you know, it's very multi-dimensional exploration, let's put it that way. And what people come back with, Heather, they say, my life has been changed. We hear this all the time from every program, starting with the Gateway. You know, we're talking self-discovery here in a major way. They are getting an expanded view of themselves and understanding of who they are, perhaps what they came here to do. A lot of them encounter loved ones who have died. A lot of people come here because they're at a crossroads in their life and they're going, I need to have a better understanding of which way to go. Mm-hmm. Of course, a lot of people come, too, because I want to have an out-of-body experience. You know, that would be cool.
Oh, sure. Why not?
Why not? But mainly, I think people are looking for deeper meaning, a greater connection to the all that is, if I may put it that way.
Oh, sure.
Themselves.
In our culture, we don't have that. What we have is the tangible world, right? And everyone has a sense that there's more than that.
Yeah,
and,
right, exactly.
You know, that's
and
why...
How do you get to it?
Exactly right. And so what's always intrigued me about the Monroe Institute is here you've got Bob Monroe, who had these experiences, thought he was going crazy, found out, no, I'm not going crazy. This is a real phenomenon. So he founds an institute to learn,
to explore it and bring other people in and say, hey, guys, let's all go explore it together. And what's beautiful about it, now, there are places where you can go for the non-physical, and they're called churches or mosques or synagogues or whatever. And that's what he didn't want to do. He didn't want to put another overlay, another belief system on it. His whole thing was, look, I'm going to give you the tools, and that's what these focus levels are. I'm going to teach you how to get into the state of no time so that you, and depending on one's belief system, you can go into past lives, and I say quote unquote, because my own personal belief is time is probably simultaneous as opposed to so linear as past, present, future. Mm-hmm. But however one looks at it, you can go and explore these other lives or you can explore other parts of, physical matter reality. If you learn the out-of-body techniques, let's say you want to see what old Aunt Mary is doing. Is she okay? Then you can go do it now. Or perhaps remote viewing. That's a whole other topic. But all of these are aspects of who we all are. It's just a question of learning how to access these states. And that's what we do here. And the difference is we don't put it in a religious term. You don't have to learn how to meditate and using particular mantras. You don't have to have a particular religious belief. We've had, I think, every type of religious person walk through here. And what I love about it is it works for everybody.
Well, that's what I like.
It doesn't matter if you're a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim or an atheist. It doesn't matter. It works.
And you don't have to be born specially gifted, right? It's not elitist or exclusionary in any way. And as I'm listening to you, what I hear is soul work. This is something that you probably know, Dr. Albert Taylor, who wrote Soul Traveler, and we were having just an afternoon conversation one day, and I was asking him about remote viewing. I said, well, does remote viewing fit into all of this? And he said, oh, it absolutely does. What the whole thing is, it's soul work. And
there you go.
That sounds like what this is here. This is your soul finding out exactly what it is. What is it doing here? What does it have to offer? And then going into these focus levels is almost like, I don't know, graduation levels or something like that.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
And then you come back with an understanding you would not have had without experiencing those focus levels. And what I really like is it's without drugs. You don't need to.
Exactly.
You don't have to go to the
Bob
shady.
was lethal on that topic. In fact, he didn't even like drinking. And my mother did like her martinis, thank you very much. Good Southern lady. And she liked it with 2 olives. And Bob would just sit there and go, because he didn't see the need for it. Plus the fact, after this happened to him, interestingly, it was almost like an allergy. Because he used to be a martini drinker back in the old days. You know, he was a New Yorker. He was
that was the drink.
In broadcasting. He was a hardcore businessman. And then this stuff started happening to him in 1958. He was in his 40s. And it got to the point he couldn't drink anymore. He'd break out in a sweat. But the whole thing was, and this is what he started teaching me at age 14. I love it. He had a tape recorder beside my bed with these funny sounds. We didn't call them hemi-sync at the time. It was just those funny sounds to help me sleep better. And he had an affirmation on the tape. And the affirmation was, I choose to know and understand myself to the extent that I can exercise complete control of myself. Now, this is for a teenager, 14-year-old.
Wow.
Because he felt that drugs, alcohol including that, would take away your ability to control this ability to focus your consciousness. And, of course, it does.
Interesting. Well, very, very interesting. I like it because this is a method that is available to anyone. You don't have to have, there's no, how am I trying to say this? There's no barrier to entry.
No, there isn't. There is no barrier in belief system. It doesn't matter what you believe. Even our dear friends who would object to the word soul, which, by the way, Bob would. Bob wouldn't use a lot of S words. He wouldn't use the word soul. He wouldn't use the word spiritual, which it's kind of interesting. And my mother was like a Christian mystic. That was really interesting, that was an interesting combination between
I bet you had some fascinating conversations overheard at your house.
Oh, yes, indeed. But, oh, gosh, I lost my rabbit.
Well, actually, that's all right. It's perfect timing for you to lose your rabbit because we got to take a break. But what I'd like to do when we come back, because hemi-sync is brought up a lot in our just first little bit here, when we come back, let's talk about that. For people who may not know what hemi-sync is, I think we ought to have a conversation about that. So stand by, Nancy. We're off to a fantastic start with Nancy McMoneagle tonight. And everybody, go get your refill and settle into a nice comfy spot because you do not want to miss this tonight. I'm Heather Wade.
But a slow